There is a factory in Karlskoga in central Sweden that is currently building one of the most in-demand air defense weapons in the Western world. Not a hypersonic interceptor, not a laser, not a missile of any kind. It is a 40mm cannon, and the design at its heart is more than 70 years old. The Bofors 40mm was never supposed to still be here. The original L/60 version entered service in 1932, built to knock biplanes out of the sky. Its successor, the L/70, was developed in the late 1940s because jet aircraft had made the old gun too slow. By the late 1970s, the missile age had made even the improved version look like a museum piece. The British Army, which had relied on radar-guided Bofors guns as its primary light anti-aircraft weapon since 1953, retired them in 1979 and replaced them with the Rapier missile system. Across NATO, the story was the same. Guns were out, missiles were in. The logic seemed unanswerable. And yet, in April 2026, Ukraine's Ministry of Defense announced that Sweden is spending 400 million euros, nearly a third of its entire new 1.2 billion euro aid package, on a weapon system built around that same Bofors 40mm gun. Denmark has joined the procurement. Deliveries are expected within 12 months. And in a shipyard on the other side of the North Sea, the Royal Navy is fitting 2 of these guns to every one of its brand new Type 31 frigates. So here is the puzzle. NATO retired this gun because it was obsolete. NATO is now buying this gun because everything else is. Something fundamental has changed in the mathematics of air defense. And a weapon designed when the Spitfire was cutting edge has ended up on the right side of it. To understand why the Bofors is back, you first have to understand why it left. For the first half of the 20th century, anti-aircraft guns made perfect sense. Aircraft were relatively slow, they flew predictable paths on bombing runs, and they had to come close to their targets to hit them. A gun that could throw a stream of 40mm shells into their flight path had a genuine chance of a kill. The Bofors L/60 became one of the most widely produced weapons of the Second World War for exactly this reason. It defended convoys in the Atlantic, airfields in the Pacific, and cities across Europe. It was cheap, reliable, and everywhere. Then aircraft got faster. Jets compressed engagement windows from minutes to seconds. The L/70 answered with a higher muzzle velocity and a faster rate of fire, and for a while it held the line. But by the 1960s and 70s, strike aircraft were flying low, fast, and increasingly armed with standoff weapons, missiles they could launch from beyond any gun's reach. A cannon with an effective ceiling of a few kilometers simply could not touch a fighter-bomber that never entered its envelope. The missile solved that problem. A surface-to-air missile could reach out tens of kilometers, chase a maneuvering target, and carry enough explosive to guarantee a kill. Yes, each missile cost vastly more than a shell, but when the target was a $40 million aircraft with a highly trained pilot inside, the exchange rate was irrelevant. Spending $1 million to destroy something worth $40 million is not a cost, it is a bargain. That logic governed Western air defense for 50 years. It is why the British Army swapped Bofors guns for Rapier. It is why Germany retired its Gepard self-propelled anti-aircraft guns in 2010, judging them relics of a Cold War that had ended. Gun-based air defense did not die because the guns stopped working. It died because the targets became too fast, too distant, and too valuable for guns to matter. Every assumption in that sentence has now been broken. The weapon that broke it does not fly fast. It does not maneuver hard. It does not carry a pilot. The Shahed 136 loitering munition cruises at roughly 120 miles per hour, slower than many propeller aircraft from the 1940s. At altitudes the old Bofors gunners would have considered a gift. Individually, it is one of the easiest aerial targets of the modern era. The problem is that it does not come individually. Russia now launches these drones in waves of several hundred in a single night, produced at a rate estimated at more than 5,000 per month, at a unit cost of somewhere between $20,000 and $50,000. And that changes the arithmetic of air defense completely. Consider what happens when a Patriot battery engages a Shahed. The PAC-3 MSE interceptor costs roughly $4 million. The target costs perhaps $35,000. Every successful intercept, every single one, is a financial defeat of somewhere around 100 to 1. As we explored in our video on Ukraine's drone war milestone, Kyiv has spent 3 years wrestling with exactly this equation, building interceptor drones for a couple of $1,000s apiece, precisely because the missile-based answer was bankrupting its air defense network shell by shell. Now run the same engagement with a gun. A modern 40mm programmable round costs on the order of a few $1,000s. A burst of them, enough to shred a Shahed, cost a fraction of what a single short-range missile does, let alone a Patriot. Suddenly, the exchange rate flips. The defender is destroying the attacker's weapon for less than the attacker paid to build it. In a war of industrial attrition, that is the only maths that matters. Ukraine proved this in the field before any procurement office caught up. The German Gepards, the same vehicles Berlin had retired as obsolete, became the single most celebrated Shahed killers of the war. Ukrainian crews decorated their turrets with rows of kill marks. One commander, asked to name Ukraine's top 3 weapons against the Shahed, gave an answer that has since entered military folklore: Gepard, Gepard, and Gepard. The Royal United Services Institute put it more formally, noting that gun systems are generally preferred over missiles wherever possible, because the cost per engagement is so much lower, and the ammunition so much more available. The lesson was unmistakable. The drone had dragged aerial warfare back down into the gun's envelope. Slow, low, and cheap. The only question was which gun would answer. And this is where Sweden had an advantage nobody else could match, because Sweden had never actually stopped. While other nations were scrapping their anti-aircraft guns, Bofors, now BAE Systems Bofors, but still building in Karlskoga, as it has for more than a century, kept refining both the gun and, more importantly, what comes out of it. The modern gun is the Bofors-40 Mark IV. It is a lightweight, digitized, electrically driven descendant of the L/70, capable of going from warning to firing in under half a second, with a rate of fire of up to 300 rounds per minute, and an effective reach, depending on target and conditions, of up to 12 kilometers. Impressive numbers. But the gun is not the revolution. The revolution is the ammunition. It is called 3P, pre-fragmented, programmable, proximity-fuzed, and it is worth slowing down to appreciate what each of those words is doing. Pre-fragmented means the shell body is packed with thousands of tungsten pellets, arranged before it ever leaves the factory. When the round detonates, it does not simply explode. It throws a dense, engineered cloud of metal into a precise volume of sky. A drone does not need to be hit directly. It needs only to fly into that cloud. And a Shahed's thin airframe, exposed engine, and unprotected warhead give it no chance at all. Programmable means that every single round is individually instructed as it enters the breach. A small internal battery wakes up, and in the fraction of a second before firing, the fire control system programs the fuse by induction, telling that specific shell exactly how to behave against the specific target it is about to meet. There are 6 modes, ranging from armor-piercing settings against hardened targets to gated proximity modes tuned for small aerial threats. The operator does not swap ammunition types. The same belt of shells can engage a drone, a fast attack boat, and a target behind cover, one after another, each round configured differently on its way out of the barrel. Proximity-fuzed means the shell senses its target and detonates at the optimal point just in front of it, placing that tungsten cloud directly in the drone's path. And critically, the fuse's sensors are almost entirely resistant to jamming. Regular viewers will remember our video on Sweden's bonus shell, the smart artillery round that hunts Russian tanks through smoke and electronic warfare without ever needing GPS. The 3P round is the same national design philosophy applied to air defense. Put the intelligence inside the projectile, where the enemy cannot reach it. Step back for a moment and consider what that actually represents. For 70 years, air defense assumed that precision had to live in the missile, an expensive, self-contained robot that flew itself to the target. Bofors took a different path. Keep the launcher dumb, cheap, and fast. A gun, essentially unchanged in concept since the 1940s, and make the ammunition brilliant instead. A missile carries its guidance, its motor, and its seeker to the grave with every shot. A 3P shell carries only a fuse and some tungsten. That is why one costs millions and the other costs thousands. The Swedes did not modernize the gun so much as they relocated the intelligence out of the platform into the round. The system now carrying that philosophy to war is called the Tridon Mk2, and BAE Systems Bofors unveiled it at the Eurosatory Defense Exhibition in June 2024, with unusually candid marketing. Tens of thousands of drones, the company noted, are being shot down every month on today's battlefields, and this threat has exposed a dangerous gap in NATO's air defenses. Tridon Mk2 exists to fill it. The concept is almost aggressively simple. Take the naval Bofors-40 Mark IV, the same mounting proven at sea, and bolt it to the back of a Scania truck. Because the gun uses electric drives rather than hydraulics, it can be integrated onto almost any carrier, including the BVS-10 tracked vehicle for rough terrain. Pair it with Saab's Giraffe 1X radar, which can detect small aerial targets at considerable range, and you have a complete kill chain, detect, track, engage, that can drive to wherever the drones are coming from tonight, and be somewhere else tomorrow. Ukraine will be its proving ground. On the 3rd of February 2026, Sweden and Denmark announced a joint procurement, Stockholm financing Tridon systems worth 2.1 billion kroner across 3 separate aid packages, Copenhagen adding roughly 480 million kroner more, equipment corresponding to an entire air defense battalion, with deliveries beginning inside 12 months. Then, on the 6th of April, Kyiv's Ministry of Defense confirmed the scale of Sweden's commitment, 400 million euros for Tridon Mk2, explicitly framed as an answer to the Shahed. The packages include spare parts and, tellingly, very large quantities of 3P ammunition. Sweden has stated openly that the framework is ready for rapid follow-on orders if other nations want in. And other nations are watching, including one with a longer Bofors history than almost anybody. Britain built the Bofors gun under license for decades. British gunners fired it over Normandy, over Korea, and from the decks of the Royal Navy for generations. And now it is coming back into British service, from the sea first. Every one of the Royal Navy's 5 new Type 31 frigates carries 2 Bofors 40 Mark IV guns as secondary armament, alongside a 57mm Bofors main gun, all of them manufactured in Karlskoga. HMS Venturer, the lead ship, rolled out of Babcock's build hall at Rosyth in May 2025 and is working towards sea trials, with HMS Active afloat behind her as of March 2026. In February, Babcock and BAE Systems Bofors signed an agreement to jointly support these guns throughout the ship's lives. The thinking is exactly the drone war logic we have been describing. A frigate cannot afford to spend a £1 million missile on every cheap drone or explosive-laden speedboat that approaches it. As we noted in our video on the Challenger 3 program, British procurement has often been slow to absorb the lessons of Ukraine, but the Type 31's gun fit is one place where the lesson arrived early. There is, however, a contrast buried in this story, and it is an uncomfortable one for London. The Royal Navy will soon operate 10 of these guns at sea. The British Army, on land, where Russian drones have violated NATO airspace, where a Shahed-type drone struck a house in Poland in 2025, currently operates none. The Ministry of Defense has shown no formal interest in acquiring Tridon for ground-based air defense, even as Sweden and Denmark buy it for Ukraine. Even as Germany prepares to spend billions on Rheinmetall's competing Sky Ranger system, and even as the gun at Tridon's heart is already in the British inventory, on British warships, with a British-owned parent company building it. The country that retired the Bofors in 1979 in favor of missiles has, in a sense, still not fully unlearned that decision, while the country that never stopped building it is now selling drone defense to half of Europe. So what does this all mean? It would be easy to file this story under military nostalgia. Old weapon gets second life, everything old is new again. That framing misses the point entirely. The Bofors did not come back because armies got sentimental. It came back because the drone reversed a 50-year trend in the economics of air warfare. For half a century, aerial threats became steadily faster, rarer, and more expensive, and defenses followed them up the cost curve, missile for missile. The Shahed broke that pattern. It made the threat slow, numerous, and cheap. And a defense built entirely of $4 million interceptors cannot survive contact with a $35,000 enemy that arrives 500 at a time. Attrition warfare does not care how sophisticated your interceptor is. It cares whether you can afford the next one. The deeper lesson is about where military intelligence should live. The missile age assumed it had to live in the weapon. Every shot a self-guiding machine, every engagement a small act of financial sacrifice. The Swedish answer, refined quietly in Karlskoga while the rest of NATO looked elsewhere, was to leave the launcher simple and make the ammunition smart. A gun is just a pipe and a breech. It does not become obsolete. Only the shell does. And shells can be reinvented forever. Ukraine's Gepard crews discovered this truth with 1970s vehicles and kill marks painted on their turrets. Sweden industrialized it, and within the next 12 months, Tridon batteries with 90 years of Bofors lineage behind them will be standing between Ukrainian cities and the nightly drone waves, spending thousands of dollars to defeat what missiles were defeating with millions. In Karlskoga, the production line is running. The gun it builds was designed for a war of biplanes, adapted for a war of jets, retired for a war of missiles, and vindicated by a war of drones. 90 years after the first Bofors barrels were rifled in that same Swedish town, the shells coming off the line today are programmed, one by one, in the half-second before they fire. The gun never changed its mind about what air defense should cost. The rest of the world just took 90 years to agree with it.